So here we are again in the lab, and thankfully this is not a repair video. This is actually a mod video, and the subject of our modification tonight was going to be the Nintendo Entertainment System, the original, circa from sometime just after I was born. And the mod we're going to do is actually to replace the internal spring-loaded cartridge system with a aftermarket mod that was designed. Actually, it was a Kickstarter, and maybe perhaps some of you had gone and picked it up. And it is the let me get the name, get this right. Blinken Light Win repair system. So this is from Arcade Works, perhaps, and Arcade Works, yeah. Made the plastic says made in the U.S., but I'm not entirely sure that's true. I'm not sure if the plastic was actually shot. I should say I don't know if this was actually shot for molds in the U.S. or if it was done. The design work was done in the U.S. and then shot somewhere else. But whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't know if you can actually see that, but anyway, you give a little free advertising to these guys. www.arcadeworks.net. And essentially it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward. There's two pieces primarily. There is this one here, so I'm going to just zoom in a little bit. This is the actual piece that replaces the spring loading, spring descending mechanism where you normally put your cartridge in there and press down and it would go into the actual unit. One of the design flaws essentially of this, and we'll take a look at it a bit closer when we actually open up the unit and install this, was essentially that when you pushed it in, there was a clip in the back where the cartridge actually plugged into it. It apparently came loose and had intermittent contact. And I suppose that depending on which pins the game cartridge used, some games worked, some games didn't. Depending on whether or not that connector, let's say the connector was in the back here. Whenever you jammed it in and down, it wiggled it and broke it off. And so the second piece is the actual connector replacement. And basically, again, I'm interested in seeing exactly what this looks like. But essentially, it's going to go in something like this, where you plug your cartridge into this top connector. Oh, this is horrible. And the bottom connector here is going to be permanently plugged into wherever it would normally be plugged. And actually, I think I have an idea how that's going to work. So let's go ahead and open up ye old NES and do this replacement. Alright, so we're about to open this up. I just wanted to, so obviously we've got to, we'll start off with popping off, getting these screws out. I don't know if you can see this. So this unit was bought in Canada because that's where I am, and that's where. And in fact, this unit is not my personal unit. This one is my wife's toy, so it were. I ended up buying, or I should say, pledging to get that Kickstarter for that repair unit for her. She really enjoys playing this, and I didn't really want to see her not be able to use this, so it looked like a good idea. We'll give it a try. I don't think we've actually encountered a cartridge that we've had problems with. So we may be, one of the lucky ones where the actual cartridge system, worked reasonably well. But anybody who's interested in opening this up will need a screwdriver that has a rather, a thin shank here, because otherwise you're not going to get down the holes to be able to open this up. A little annoying, but hey, better than the weird screw heads that they have these days. A lot of devices. Okay. Should have 6 screws. 5. One does not want to come out. Okay. Alright, well, these guys still have all of their plastic in them, so I'm guessing this guy hasn't been opened ever. Okay. Let's flip it around. There we go. There's that last screw. Alright. Well, we're in. That was relatively easy. So I'm just going to move this here. We'll just come down a little bit. There you go. Alright, so a little bit. Super YouTube professionalism. So this is the springy mechanism here is the one that we're going to be replacing, I'm guessing. So it looks like there's a shield over the whole thing, and there are a bunch of screws. So I'm going to use a different screwdriver because that one is not the greatest. Let's see. That can work. Oh yeah. Again, self-tappers into plastic. And I guess if anybody else is doing this, if you need a word of warning, these are, so normally these screws are into self-tappers into plastic, and they're into plastic posts, like, you know, something similar to these guys here. And these posts are really beefy looking, so I don't think there's any issues. But on internal posts, and maybe we'll see it a little bit, but sometimes they're really thin, and that's a recipe for disaster. When you torque really hard on the screw like that, you can actually just shear the actual the plastic insert post right off. So just be a bit careful with that. It just means, you know, don't apply a huge amount of force, you know, twisting force right away. Just sort of slowly try and get the screw loose, because they can be stuck a little bit. So 2 more screws left, and it looks like we're also going to have to undo a couple of screws here as well. To actually get the mechanism out. So it looks like the plastic part that we got, which I will show you in a second, replaces the entire spring loading mechanism here. And I think before we pull it out, I might do a quick demonstration. What am I missing? Why is this not coming out? Oh, there it is. Okay, so that's the shielding. And aha! Look at that. Isn't that fancy? So that is very interesting. Let me go get a cartridge and I'll be right back. So here we have a classic Wizards and Warriors. And I'm not entirely sure this cartridge actually works. I don't know what the problem is with it. I bought it secondhand. No clue. I should probably take it apart again at some point and actually try and see if I can figure out what the issue is. But the first start is, you know, maybe there's something here, and I don't know. Anyway, so we'll replace this and we'll see. But essentially, this is how the original mechanism works. So you insert your cartridge here, and you can see the the connector here. Now, this connector actually does not move. So as this moves down, you'll note that this connector does not move. So technically, what's happening is this connector is going, the cartridge is going into the connector like this, and then tilting against that back connector. So there's, like, you know, leaf, like a PCB leaf spring, and it's tilting inside there. So it could be screwed. Well, I should say that it's the other way around. Actually, the actual PCB leaf's in there, so there's an actual connector that's going around there. So it's as it's moving, it's basically, you know, shoving against those fingers on the connector, those finger contacts. So you know, it goes in like this, and you push it down. Now, what the guys from I never remember these guys' name. Hang on a second. Arcade Works, but Blink and Light Wind. What these guys from Blink and Light Wind are basically saying is that the problem is that when you insert your cartridge and you jam the thing in, this whole thing moves, and what's happening is this cartridge, or this connector here, is actually connected to this, probably this PCB here underneath, and as you're jamming it, this whole thing is basically wiggling, and the connector underneath is failing, and that's where they say the failure mode is. I'm not sure, but we'll take it apart a little bit further, and we'll go and take a look and find out. So actually, here's the original unit still. So I've taken the screws out, but I wanted to show you this. I didn't notice this before. These contacts, so the contacts that are inside here are actually strapped all the way down, and you can see them actually physically going down to a bottom connector down here. So what we'll do is we'll lift this guy out somehow. I have to take this whole thing out. Ooh, I might. Okay, there should be just one more screw. there's always one more screw. Always gets screwed like that. Oh. I got that pile of screws screwed up. Oh well. Okay, there we go. So now I'm assuming. Okay, there we go. So that's the actual cartridge loader mechanism. A little springy thingy, and you can see there's the mechanism that allows it to click in place. So put that aside. Now here's the actual connector, and okay, so let's unplug a few of these things, because it looks like we're going to need to do that. It's kind of fun to think that this thing hasn't been apart like this since it was probably manufactured over 20 years ago. I'm pretty sure this is at least 20 years old. So that's the bottom RFI shield. And this is interesting. I didn't know that, but there's a plastic protective cover under, and underneath that was sort of like a dummy thing, and there's actually a connector here, and that's fascinating. I have no idea what that's for. Maybe somebody that does will post something on the in the comments, but that's interesting. So essentially, this should just come right out. Famous last words. Let's take these guys there. Ow, that hurt. Okay, so in theory, there we go. You might be able to hear my daughter murmuring in the background. I'm going to go take this off, and I will be right back. Alright, so that came out pretty relatively easily. That's interesting. So there's actually, you can see there's a row of contacts, or a row of connector contacts here, and a row in the back. So there's actually two rows, top and bottom, which again makes sense. And they are different. They're not. They don't seem to be jumpered or linked anywhere. So there really were two sets, and that's interesting because if I look at the bottom row of contacts here, I don't know if that'll come through, but anyway, they don't seem to be at sort of an even level. It already seems to be like some of them are pushed down more than the others. So maybe that, again, that action of sort of, tilting the PCB, the cartridge on the PCB on the cartridge, right? This connector here, this connector PCB, having that tilt down on these things, pressing sort of maybe unevenly or whatever, has caused them to wear into non-evenly. So again, maybe our unit doesn't have this problem, but I could easily see how that would happen. And then the other thing, so what the blink and light wind guys were saying is that essentially, so it was this way, essentially is that constant pressing of that cartridge down and shoving it back would actually disconnect or dislodge this connector here, which I'm not quite sure I believe that. I'm not entirely sure that that's true. It might be, but that was screwed in so the actual, so if you want to look at it from here, it was in like this, screwed in two places, and that screw went through into the actual case plastic, and then the mount point, which by the way, if we look at when this fits back, or fit this back together, those screw holes match up. So all of the force that was being put down on these front two screws was also being put down to securely bind these two together, and then the two were bound together with the screw on in the back. So I'm not sure I buy this thing wiggling back and forth like that because of pressure either being jammed in back like this and sort of tilting it, or slamming it down, kind of tilting it this way, like this torquing like this. I'm not sure, but that's what apparently this thing tries to solve. So without further ado, let's try and put this one in and see what happens. Now, something quick to note, so this is the actual connector, the small PCB. revision 2. I wonder what they got wrong in revision 1. Alright, sorry about that. So yeah, again, if we have a quick look here, there's basically there's almost nothing on this PCB. There's one cap and an SO8 IC of some sort, and you probably can't see that, but I'll read off the number on that, the part number on that, and that is a 12F629 from Microchip. Surprise, surprise. So that's a little PIC 12F. So that's really interesting, because that's in the path through here, and again, in the original system here, straight through. So I wonder what exactly they're doing. And it's just, you know, it's these pins here. There's something going on here. Very interesting. And clearly it's on the NES side and not on the cartridge side, because, you know, there's some pins that are going through there, but they're clearly, or well, maybe not for you, but for me anyway, they're clearly going through to the bottom connector, which is connected to the NES. So you're good. Your guess is as good as mine. But let's go ahead and install this and see what happens. So the idea is, I guess you clip that on there, which is pretty painless. And then you got to get this part over it, which again seems to also be pretty painless. Now a little bit of structural detail here, of course, when this is all screwed in place, any force against the back here is going to be held, or is going to be arrested by these clips, these big plastic clips that are going here. So you can put as much force as you want, and that force is going to be transmitted this way against the clip, and not against the board, not on this connector. So it really will be held by this entire, you know, thingy doodad here, which is, I guess, what the whole point of this was. So we'll do a little quick reassembly of all of this. And again, I really have no idea what this connector is for on the bottom. This is fascinating. So if anybody does have an idea, I'd be really curious to. Really curious. I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere. No, can't be the first person to have ever opened up a Nintendo Entertainment System. I can't imagine. So I'm sure it's there somewhere. So we'll now go ahead, and I'm going to go and reconnect all these plugs before I forget exactly where they go. They're all thankfully keyed too, which is handy. And I think this just slips right in there. I don't think I'm pinning any wires, which is also kind of a concern. So these two are used, but two of these will not be, because they were the ones that were holding these two pieces together. So quick note, when you're putting this back together, remember to put the top shield on first before starting to screw all these in, because actually most of these screws, there's a couple here, but most of these screws actually go through both the top shield, the PCB, or something of that nature, and then into the bottom shield below it, so it sandwiches all of them together. So be careful. Also, watch out when you're actually screwing them down, because you can put a huge amount of force like this on that little screw, and again, you can just torque it right out of, or torque off, or rip off the plastic post underneath there. So let's see if it works. Ooh, that's a really nice tight fit. So I'm kind of curious if this is going to work. I'm going to open this up afterwards before trying this out, and we're going to take a look. But let me get the top cover on, and we'll see where we go next. Remember, some solutions require the right tool, and others require the righter tool. And there we have it. Alright, let's see if this worked. Ha! Haha! That's the first time that this has worked on this particular NES, so I think we've succeeded. Catch you later.